Well, welcome to the Liberty Show, where we talk about American classical education, and we invite our listeners to join us in improving the moral and intellectual character of the next generation. I'm your host. I'm Matthew Kirby. I'm CEO of Liberty Classical Schools, and our mission is to launch and support K-12 American classical schools that emphasize virtuous living, traditional learning, and civic responsibility. And you can read more about us at libertyclassicalschools.org. Today, my guest is someone that I've wanted to meet and spend time with for many, many years, Dr. Christopher Perrin. And I'm going to do a quick introduction. I can't wait to kind of jump into conversation with him. If you've been in classical circles at all, you're very well aware of who Dr. Perrin is. But he's a national leader, author, consultant, and speaker in the classical education movement. He is widely known for authoring a book called The Introduction to Classical Education, a guide for parents. And if you have that book and you're in the Atlanta area and you didn't buy it yourself, the chances are I may have bought it for you because we bought dozens of those things years ago as we were getting ahead of the launch of our first school, Atlanta Classical Academy, because it's a great way to get your arms quickly around the fundamentals, at least, of classical education. Dr. Perrin holds a BA in history from the University of South Carolina. I hope I'll get to talk to him a little bit about South Carolina. He holds an MDiv and PhD from Westminster Theological Seminary, and he studied literature at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, which is in the same town as my alma mater. In the late 90s, he founded a Christian classical school in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where he served as headmaster. And in 2001, he founded the Classical Academy Press, which is a curriculum, media, and consulting company serving the classical school ecosystem, if you will. He's CEO and publisher there. And if you haven't visited their website, I encourage you to do that. He's got a tremendous number of resources, excellent books there, and a delightful resource for all of those interested in classical education. His consultancy work spans into the charter, public, private, and Christian and homeschooling sectors, where he offers support. I'm going to ask him a little bit about that. And he is also the host of a very successful podcast called The Christopher Perrin Show on the True North Podcast Network. Now, Dr. Perrin, I'm so glad that you'd be willing to jump on this call with us, and delighted to talk with you today.
It is my pleasure. I can't wait to get going. You get to know you.
Well, good. As I said, you're very well known for describing what classical education is, and rather than just doing that straight away, I thought we might take a virtual tour through a classical school, and we could pretend it's one of mine or any of a number of classical schools around the country. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that it's a K-12 classical school. Perhaps it's in a charter environment. I suppose it could also be a public school. Maybe we'll talk about the distinctions there a little bit. But I was hoping we could sort of do a virtual walkthrough, and I could get you to sort of share with us what are the observable elements and characteristics of a classical school. So as we walk in the foyer of the school, probably meet the receptionist, and we start to look around, are there things that we might notice or see, observe right away that would stand out to you that this is indeed a classical school?
What a great question. I have talked about this in the past when I've done faculty training as a 5-sense inventory, because it does get at something important. Because it's hard for us to imagine doing school or education in ways that are much different from what we receive. We tend to parent the way we were parented, and we tend to teach the way we were taught.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to do architecture and prefer decorum and decor based on what we know. It's hard to think outside of the box that you've lived in. And the only way that really happens is through reading and experience and conversation. So I remember as a young headmaster myself having these questions. First of all, I remember asking, what are the liberal arts again? Can I even name them? What is a liberal arts education? What is it? What are the great books? What is virtue? Why do these transcendentals of the true, the good, and the beautiful just persist throughout history as something that humans should always be aspiring to? And where is the truth in my school? Where's the goodness? And where's the beauty in my school? And these things began to challenge my own experience and background. And I knew that school could be something that transcended my own experience, could be better, could be different. But it was hard for me to determine what those things would be. So it's a great question to ask. How do you imagine something that you haven't ever seen before?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just think about the average, say, second grade classroom, or first grade classroom. Because of our own experience, there's a kind of decor. There's a first grade or a kindergarten aesthetic, and we all know what it is. And we'd never decorate our living room by that aesthetic. We'd never want to live in a kindergarten classroom, would we? But we think that 5-year-olds are happy to be there 7 hours a day,
Right.
3.5 hours a day. So it's plastic, it's laminated materials, it's primary colors, it's cartoons and lots of them everywhere. It's bins with books and materials and visual aids, that you can see, and some of them are spilling out. Little chairs everywhere. It's not what we would call beautiful, but it is what we might call functional. And this is why the architecture of our schools are the way they are, because they've been designed in order to minimize cost and to provide for functionality. So they're going to be square, they're going to be tiled floors, there will be overhead fluorescent lights. Now, maybe they're LED now. They are cheap. Why? Because they're cheap and easy to maintain, and they give good light. But you would never put fluorescent lights, overhead lights in your house or a hotel lobby.
Lots of primary colors.
But we will do it at school. And the windows do not open because it's much more economical. It's much less expensive to have casement windows that will never open, if you have windows at all, because those are optional.
Right.
You'd never design your home that way. So you'd never design a hotel that way. You'd never design a restaurant that way, but we'll do it with school. So you start to imagine going into a school, and what comes to mind? Your own school. Long hallways, rooms and boxes, one after another, optional windows, overhead lights, tiled floors, and buzzers that buzz. And I mean, they're strident. They're not bells. They're not like bronze bells ringing like at a monastery. No, they're buzzers. Okay, I'll stop there. So to engage in your question requires a kind of creative leap. And this is why when you hire a second grade teacher, a first grade teacher, and say, please decorate your room, they're going to decorate it the way they've seen second grade rooms all their lives. It took me a while to get to this point, but eventually I realized that the architecture that should inform what a school looks like should probably be the home.
Mm-hmm.
If not the home, it's the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not the museum, it's a cafe or a conservatory or a church, other buildings that we love and respect and want to be in. So I walk in the lobby of the school that I'm thinking of that would be more ideal. I wouldn't see a receptionist first. I would see beautiful art first. I'd see an open space. I'd see a place that's welcoming to me, almost like a good hotel lobby or the nice anteroom to a good restaurant where there's a place to be seated and something to enjoy, and it's comfortable, and there's something to see that is equipping me or providing me with a transition so I can begin to see into the school, but I'm not quite in yet. I'm in an entryway of some kind, a lobby, a welcoming space where I can be seated, where I can see things that represent what the school is. So most schools would say, well, that's wasted space. Just come right up to a counter and get in. And maybe there's a buzzer. Maybe you need to get some kind of a lanyard, a sticker. And make sure the first thing that you encounter is this place going to be safe or not? I guess it's dangerous because the doors don't open unless I'm buzzed in, and I need to get some special card, and there's someone looking at me right away to make sure I'm okay to be there. They don't do that at a restaurant. They don't do that at a hotel.
Yeah.
So I know safety is a concern in our schools today, although your chance of being shot in a school, much less than, but anyway, let's leave that aside for a moment. I know that's an issue. So I would see beautiful art. I'd see open space. I'd see some, a place of welcome. I'd probably see, maybe a display case where I could see student artwork. Maybe I could see some of the achievements of students. Maybe I could see, an aquarium. Maybe there's something like you would see in a good natural science room. Maybe there's specimens to look at. Maybe there's some reproduction of classic work of art, or maybe it's art that's been produced by the students. But I would see something that would be museum-like.
Yeah.
A good museum.
Yeah.
That's what I'd see when I came in. And then there might even be a sonic atmosphere. So that's what I'm seeing. But what would I hear? What would I smell? What could I touch? I would want, maybe I'd be offered coffee. I know of one school where they always have a big silver urn of coffee going for when parents or other folks come into the school. So as I'm approaching, eventually I see somebody to approach, I would be greeted, and then I would be offered a cup of coffee if I'd like.
Yeah.
So there's a little hospitality. Maybe I smell some coffee that's brewing. That's what comes to mind.
That's great. That's great. Well, let's keep going a little deeper into the school. And I imagine a lot of those characteristics you touched on would translate into the classroom. But what about the classroom itself? How might the classroom appear? What might be happening there?
The classrooms would be more like a home than what we think of as a classroom. The classrooms would be decorated according to the historical period that is being studied in that class and the literature that may be studied if it's, say, K through 6. So the K through 6 classes can be historically oriented and literarily oriented. There would be beautiful, well-placed, curated art, and also at the appropriate scale. So what happens when a classical school first gets started is they realize they need beautiful art. And so typically, you order some 8x10 prints and you put those across the whiteboard in the front and say, oh, yeah, beautiful art. And it's even according to the theme of what we study here. But from the back of the room, they look like postage stamps.
Right.
They're not the right size. But again, our teachers have just been trained by their own experiences. It's not their fault. And so they can't imagine that you would actually print something that's 4x6 or 4x4. And they can't imagine you would frame anything and hang it on an art rail. I mean, this is a classroom. You stick it on there with tape or something. You don't. This is a class. But no, a beautiful classroom has art curated and properly displayed, and it's much more minimalistic. So if you go to a good museum, it's not just crowded with pieces. And then that art would change. It would change seasonal. So that's why it would be framed and hung on a rail with one of those wires, so that every season, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, you could put different appropriate pieces there. So this means that the teacher, as well as being an instructor, is a muse. And that means that muses work in museums. They bring inspiration and wonder, and their classroom is an opportunity to stimulate and cultivate wonder, even in the visual field. So this means a lot of stuff has to come down. A lot of the practical stuff that you think you need, you do need, but it doesn't need to come. It doesn't be hanging on the wall all the time. Another thing that I would see, maybe I would see this in the hallway or in a little atrium area. I would see a globe on 4 wheels, one of those big ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be like 2 feet in diameter, so that any teacher could bring that globe into the classroom when it was time to teach history or geography. That means you would get rid of those small little globes that are on a shelf gathering dust and that are never used.
Mm-hmm.
Except when the teacher pulls it out, stands in front of the class and says, see, this is where we live. And the only thing people can see is blue and some brown and her finger on this small globe, because even from the front of the room, you can't really see. It's just not the right scale.
Yeah.
That's designed to be for one person to use in front of a desk. But the big globe, people can gather around. So we have to pay attention to scale, just like you would at a museum. The right place, the right proportion, the right space to be able to view something and contemplate it. So the rooms would be homey. There would be floor lamps. There would be some rugs. There would be a comfortable place, especially with younger kids, for them to come gather around the teacher who might be sitting in a comfortable chair and the children sitting on a rug, for her to read stories to them. The desks would be immovable so that they could sometimes be in rows, sometimes be in project centers, and sometimes be in a horseshoe. The space would be flexible so that the desk could be arranged according to the learning that's occurring and ordered to and arranged to the kind of teaching and learning that's occurring in the classroom. The windows ideally would open. So when the weather's lovely, you can open the windows and feel a breeze, feel the warmth of the sun, hear the birds chirping. That would be nice if possible.
Yeah.
Their fluorescent lights might be there, but they'd be turned off most of the time.
Right.
There would be something to hear at various times during the year or during the day. There might be beautiful music playing. Probably not lyrical, probably instrumental music. There would be, if the teacher is a musician, she plays the flute or the recorder or the guitar or the clarinet, it would be hanging on a wall, reminding the students that any human can learn to play an instrument, probably should. And so this will lead me to a brief story, Matthew, but at Covenant Christian in Harrisburg, the fourth grade teacher there is a semi-professional clarinetist, and he plays the recorder beautifully as well. So he has a clarinet on a stand in his classroom, and the headmaster has given him permission to play at various times during the day when kids are coming in recess or from lunch or going to lunch, or in the beginning of the day or the end of the day. He can sometimes go out in the hallway and he'll just play.
I love that. That's great.
Or the other teacher who used to be there plays a guitar, and so there's a guitar in the room, and it would be played at appropriate times. So those are some things that come to mind when I think of here's one of high school. Also beautiful art, maybe oriented according to history and literature. Beautiful images and portraits of authors and famous personages that are being studied. And there's a little table where there is a Keurig and a boiler, and there are porcelain cups for every student for making tea or cocoa or coffee. And if it's in high school, there is a beautiful handcrafted wooden table, a seminar table, a set of desks. And the students sit around a large table for their instruction and teaching and discussion. And they're welcome at certain times to have a cup of coffee or a cup of cocoa. And so there's a kind of hospitality. So now we're mapping on cafe or hospitality to the learning experience.
Yeah.
I want to sit at that table, don't you?
That sounds
Beautiful wooden
beautiful.
table.
That sounds like a place you want to be.
I'm drinking some cocoa right now, and then,
I love it.
get out your text. Let's have a discussion.
I love it. That's right. Well, let's okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that teacher. What is that teacher doing in the classroom that signals to you that you're in a really excellent classical school?
The teacher is dressed well. So first of all, there's a kind of comportment and decorum that you notice among the faculty. The way they dress, the way they behave with one another, such that they are perceived over time by the students as being friends. They are a faculty of friends, that they themselves are a living curriculum. Students begin to realize that more important than the books that they're reading are the books that have read these teachers and formed them, such that these books live the ideas, the insights, the wisdom of the various liberal arts, command of language, command of logic and rhetoric, command of mathematics, pondering, weighing, massing, assessing. These things and the great books, they live inside these faculties, such that the students perceive that they're not just being taught out of a book. They're being cultivated by a person that they want to be like, that they want to emulate and imitate. And they perceive that the faculty enjoy being with one another and talking about ideas. And they perceive as well that they're invited to join that conversation as junior learners. And they begin to realize that the teachers are actually not just teachers. They continue to be students. They continue to be ongoing learners. They're curious, they're inquisitive, they're always growing. And they learn that that's the essence of being a student. And so they learn that their teacher is just a more mature student. And they begin to realize that as they learn from them, they are becoming teachers. Because as they come to know something true, good, or beautiful, they can't help wanting to talk to others about it. And that turns them into a teacher. And so the lines between teacher and student begin to blur, and they begin to see them as kind of being largely overlapping, with maturity being the key distinction. Teachers are just older. They've just been doing it longer. They've just read more books. They've acquired more skill and maturity of thought. And that's perceived. So when the student comes into a classroom, what do they see? They see on the teacher's desk that the teacher is reading another book outside of the curriculum. Why are you reading A Tale of Two Cities, Mr. Johnson? We don't teach that here, do we? Oh, I know, but we're faculty. We're reading that this quarter. Oh, your faculty read books together? Yeah, that's what we're reading. And they see things like that. Or they see Mr. Johnson with Mr. Reynolds in the cafeteria playing the guitar with him. I didn't know you played the guitar. And he says, I don't. I'm trying to learn. Mr. Reynolds convinced me to get my first guitar, so I'm taking some lessons with him. You're taking lessons from Mr. Yes. I've always wanted to learn the guitar. So they see that and they perceive it. And then, of course, when you walk in the classroom, there's the various artifacts that communicate these kinds of things. They're switching out the art, like I mentioned earlier. They see they see the teacher in conversation with another student. So he's having a tutorial, and you walk in, and he's finishing up a tutorial with another student, modeling that the teacher is not just interested in class time. The teacher is interested in human beings and the communication of the true, the good, and the beautiful, both in formal classroom settings, but also outside of class. You see the teacher sitting with students from time to time at lunch and gathering. You'd see students out on the recess field playing football with the middle school kids. One of the things I really used to love to do when I was head of school, I was a high school quarterback, not a great one, but I loved to play. And I would be the all-time quarterback with fifth graders and sixth graders, and they would play against each other.
Yep.
And when the weather was nice, especially in the fall during football season, I'd be out there. I'd love to do that. So you see that the teachers in these various roles.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's another thing you and I have in common. Is I also was a pretty marginal quarterback, but a big lover of the game, nonetheless.
Yeah, but I think you played in college, which I
well, I
did.
did. I do that. Okay, that you're painting a very beautiful picture in my mind, at least, and one that resonates a lot. Couple elements of this school we haven't quite touched on. One would be, of course, the books, and the other would be the students. So maybe a little bit about one of those. Let's talk about the students a little bit.
Oh, can I talk about the books first, since you mentioned
Okay,
it?
sure.
Because that's also, I should have mentioned that earlier. That's also what you would see in these classrooms. The school should have a library for doing some research and quiet place to study and so on. But really, the essential library of the school should live in the classrooms. The books that the students are going to be reading are on display in the classroom. I mentioned maybe images of authors and book covers could be hung as art, but there would be nice bookshelves and displays of books. And these books would not just be for display. They would be for students to take home and read. sometimes during independent time, they had finished an assignment earlier, they had a study hall. There'd be some lovely books that have already been curated that are, let's just say it's fourth grade. Yes, the fourth graders are assigned maybe 7 or 8 books that they will read with the teacher directing them throughout the year. But in addition to that, there is a number of books that are available for free reading and independent reading that also complement and extend the curriculum. Here's an example that I've seen done. And when I was head of school in 3rd grade, we taught as one of the first books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first chronicle of Narnia by Lewis. And the teacher would take, say, six weeks or so doing a deep dive, introducing the students to Narnia until they were living in Narnia and had become friends with Lucy and Susan and Peter and Edmund. And they were just, charmed by Narnia. And when it was all done, the teacher could just say something like this: well, I hope you've enjoyed this book. We're going to be moving on to another book. But, if you didn't know, there's many other chronicles that follow. Right. There's The Horse and the Boy, The Silver Chair. There's Prince Caspian and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And by the way, I have several copies here if you want to take one of them. And of course, so now what are these kids doing on Saturday? They're going to continue their story. We've got them hooked, and now they're going to read more of those books. And this just reminds me of another important pedagogical principle. It's good to make haste slowly and to do deep studies of literature rather than to superficially cover books with children. It's far better to do fewer books and go deep than to do a lot of books and just skim the surfaces. Because you can't love what you skim. You love what you linger over. So by doing 6 weeks with that book, what you've done is turned that child into a lover of reading and a lover of that series and a lover of that author, such that she will be reading when you're not around. That's what love does. When you cultivate a love for something true, good, and beautiful. So books should be out. And the same thing would be true in the middle school and high school. Some books could even be displayed as if they are art, because they are. So you could have a book on a pedestal, that's displayed. And sometimes teachers have some of their favorite books they could bring in. I have a friend who's a professor. He collects books. He studies, and this is Grant Horner at the Masters University. He loves Italian history and literature. He's a Renaissance scholar. Whenever he goes to Italy, he spends more money than he has a right to. And he gets these old books.
Right.
And then he displays them. He brings them for people to see a book that was printed 500 years ago. So books can be art. Books can be objects of contemplation even before you read them. So I think books have a special place in that regard. Books should also be talked about. They can be a part of headmaster memos. There can be book circles, book discussion, book clubs for parents. I think it's helpful when the faculty are reading at least 1 or 2 books a year, maybe even more. Maybe led by the head of school, and maybe sometimes it's just a faculty meeting. There's a brief discussion, or sometimes there's a special meeting where everybody comes to the head of school's house on a Friday night, and there's going to be a nice meal, and then it's going to culminate in maybe 90 minutes of discussing the faculty book, and it's turning into a social event as much as the book study. And when the students hear about that, it's another way that the school models what it means to be taught and to be an ongoing student.
Yeah.
Yeah. So books are really important.
Very beautiful. Okay. To round it out then, before we talk about students, just to maybe set a little context that our listeners may find helpful. So our primary mission, as I mentioned at the outset, is to launch and support classical schools. We just launched Cherokee Classical Academy in a suburb north of Atlanta about 13 weeks ago. The school opened with about 520 students, kindergarten through 6th grade, and it'll scale to become a full K-12 school over time as our students advance. But a very large majority of those 520 students walked in there because their parents signed them up. We're a charter school, public school of choice. So they're there, at least by their parents' selection. One of the big questions we got a lot from families was, well, gosh, how is my child going to adapt to this classical classroom, having not necessarily grown up in it? And of course, we have found that they adapt readily. But I'm just kind of curious if you've heard that pushback before, and sort of what is your answer to the family that is maybe concerned that Johnny or Susie, having not grown up in a classical environment, are they going to make it? Are they going to have what it takes? Will they thrive? Is it really best for them?
Yeah, I would turn that question on its head. I mean, there's a number of good ways to answer it. Here's maybe just one. A good classical education is ordered to the human being.
Hmm.
That's what's made it successful. That's why we call it classical. It means it has enduring excellence, that you just can't get rid of it. It keeps coming back because it is so good at training and cultivating human beings, because it's ordered to human nature. It teaches with the grain of human nature. And it took us centuries to understand how this was the case, to teach according to the way humans want to be taught. So, we teach students, say, grammar and language and the structure of language when they're rapidly acquiring it. When they're when they're young, how quickly we learn language
That's
when
right.
we're younger. So this is the time to study language. It's time to study grammar at about third or fourth grade, because we're ready. The brain is just designed to want to absorb language at this point. And when the kids get to be about 13 or 14, they want to reason logically. And that's why we teach them the liberal art of logic, which is the science and art of reasoning, and by implication, incorrect reasoning or the fallacies. And then as we get older, we want to learn how to express ourselves well and express our opinions and persuade others, which was why we study rhetoric in the high school years. And there's a number of other things like this we could say. I'll just say the pedagogy of singing and chanting.
Hmm.
Children love to sing, and they'll sing a jingle they hear on the radio, and then they'll remember it forever, much to our annoyance. Well, then why don't we use songs to teach history and the water cycle and Latin vocabulary and anything that we want students to master and know forever? We use songs
Hmm.
and jingles. We don't do this in 12th grade, but we do it in third and fourth grade, in the elementary years. That's just an example of how classical education is ordered to the human. So to reverse the question, how is it that students have adapted to the progressive modern schools? They don't
Right.
like it, do they?
Not so well, right?
It does, because it's not ordered to the human. That's why kids check out and say they don't like school by the time they're in, sometimes fifth, sixth grade, and say things like, "I'm not a math person," which is, of course,
Mhm.
ridiculous, because all persons are math persons. We all use numbers.
Right.
So they will adapt quite well when they realize that this is actually how they want to be taught.
Yeah.
So they're sitting in sixth or seventh grade, particularly, and we're teaching them the logical fallacies, and the kid's like, "That is like, I love this."
Yes.
Why? It's like teaching a teenager judo.
Right.
Like, he wants to be able to defend himself. So we're not going to teach karate to a 4-year-old, but you teach it to a 14-year-old, they're interested,
That's right.
especially the boys, girls too.
That's right.
So, yeah, it's a human education, and so they will adapt. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be some bumps along the way, because of how they might not have been as well prepared otherwise, especially the kids coming in, say, in sixth grade,
Mhm.
right? So the kids who are coming in K1 and 2,
Right.
they will be better sixth grade students, 4 or 5 years from now, than most of the sixth grade students you're taking now, because they're going to have to do a little bit of catching up. But they will adjust and feel like it fits who they are. Will they be challenged? Yes. But you know what? Kids want to be challenged. They don't want to be over challenged. They don't want to be challenged to the point where they break, but they want to aspire, and they want to get stronger. They want to acquire skill. So a good teacher will know how to bend but not break, and how to create fortitude and love and zeal, um, to learn skill, and to learn the true, the good, and the beautiful, to come to know it.
Yeah. Beautiful. I want to ask you about a couple of books. I don't know for certain that these two are your most recent, But you've got your most recent book, I think, on teaching, The Good Teacher, and then also The Scholé Way. And I love the subtitle, Bringing Restful Teaching and Learning Back to School and Homeschool. We certainly could dive into the key principles in each, but I'm curious of the progression there. Had you had it in your mind to do those two books one after the other ahead of time, or did these sort of come to you as a project to focus on individually?
I've been teaching on the importance of recovering restful contemplative learning for a long while. And so when I've done training and speaking, uh, that has people have responded to that and said, that's really helpful. Why? Because
Mhm,
progressive education is very frenetic. It's active learning. And of course, we do need to do active learning, um, but it's out of proportion. So that students in typical modern progressive schools don't know how to engage the world with wonder and curiosity and contemplation because we just are teaching to the test and we're checking boxes and moving through curriculum that
mhm,
kids will forget. And
mhm,
that's once kid realizes that he's going through test prep, he generally checks out. Nobody wants to be involved in a test prep course. And that's not to say that we don't in some ways prepare for certain examinations. We do. But if that is the bulk, the majority of what you're doing, it's not good education. So to recover something that's slower and restful and lingering and pondering, contemplative and even relishing is really important to create students, to actually cultivate students. The Latin word studium means zeal or affection. So a student should have a zeal and affection, a hunger for, say, the true good and beautiful. And you can't love what you don't contemplate.
mhm,
Imagine that you and your wife are sitting down at your very favorite restaurant and you got a babysitter and everything's set and you've ordered your favorite dish and you only it's expensive and it's really good and you only get this maybe once a year. And just as it's set down in front of you, you get a call from the babysitter like we've got to go. There's a problem. We have to go in 5 minutes.
mhm.
So Matthew, pound it down. So you're like,
That's right.
I can't do that. Not with this linguine. I can't do it. Uh, so when you love something, you even sometimes when you're eating, I'm just using that analogy. Sometimes you don't even want to talk to anybody. I'm just like my entire brain needs to focus on what's in my mouth. It's so
Mhm,
good. Well, we need to be able to bring similar experiences by analogy to our students who are bringing them something that sometimes surprises them, that that pulls them in with curiosity and wonder, such that they slow down and they want to linger over it, ponder and relish. Those things can be transformative. Now, can all education be that every moment? No. It might only be that way occasionally. It might only be that way 1 out of 7 is a ratio I use. That like Sunday is that day 1 out of 7. Well, what if we had a 1/7 of what we did was contemplative and filled with wonder and contemplation and was slowed down and not assessed? Then what would that do to a student?
yeah,
That's skole. Skole is the Greek word, which means undistracted time to study the things that are most worthwhile, usually with your friends, usually in a set apart place, and often with food and drink. So you're around that big table with a cup of cocoa and a teacher taking you through some Shakespeare or some poetry or a great book of history, and you get to discuss a great text and contemplate it slowly in a set apart place that's beautiful with your friends and a great teacher and a cup of cocoa or coffee. That can be skole.
yeah,
Ironically, it's the root word for school. And there's not a lot of skole in our schools anymore. So I wrote that book first because there seemed to be a need for it. But in the second book, which is a little longer book, skole is in that second book, The Good Teacher, with the 10 principles, pedagogical principles for transformative teaching. Skole is one of the 10. So I do cover it in The Good Teacher, but I do it as a smaller work that's dedicated just to skole in the skole way.
yeah,
So I did a deeper dive into skole, and then with Carrie Eben, she my co-author, we did 9 additional principles from the classical tradition that we find from great practitioners over the centuries. And it's not the only list. It's not the final list, but these 10 principles are ones you see over and over again. And that's what the good teacher is taught.
Yeah.
Principles of pedagogy rather than techniques, because the principles, if you understand a principle well, you will invent your own techniques. So if you know that you should do a deeper dive of fewer things in order to create lingering learning that is permanent, that's multum non multa, much not many. It's the second principle in our book. Once that principle is clear in your thinking as a teacher, you will be able to invent or generate techniques. So we lead with principles rather than telling a lot of specific, we give some incarnations of these principles, but we want the teachers to understand the principles, because then these become the insights that help them to know what to do in any given situation.
Yeah. Well, I have that book, and I think it is incredibly practical and incredibly helpful. And I have a sense that teachers would derive much from reading it and using it as they prepare to teach. And the Scully book, I have not acquired that one yet, but I just have to believe that that concept is one that is resonating in a big way in our modern American culture right now. I sense it and I see it, and I myself experience it. Things are moving rapidly. We're frenetic. We have been taught to and trained to multitask much to our detriment. And I think your 1/7 ratio seems as logical and beautiful as any. And I think it's a great call to slow down a little bit, to savor good things. It also presumes that we've got great things to consider and think about. And anyway, I think you're really onto something. I have to believe that families and teachers and school leaders and such are maybe deriving just feeling encouraged by your prompt to them to take a deep breath and slow down and savor.
You know, that word savor it's a great word.
Yeah.
It comes to, you probably know this, but it comes from a Latin word, sapor, saporare, and it means to. We get the word supper from it. We get the word sapience from it. It means to come to know something by tasting it.
Yep.
So savoring is a great word, and it's related to a word for knowledge and wisdom. So we talk about seeing things. Like I've come to see something as a way of describing knowledge, but we also come to know things by savoring things. So I really appreciate you bringing up that marvelous word.
Yeah.
And by the way, I had to go to that 1/7 ratio because people were overdoing it. Like I did some faculty training on, we need to slow down and do more contemplative learning. And then some wanted to do contemplation all the time.
Right.
And, we need that blend of active learning and.
Yeah. Also finding that mean. I think you refer to that in your book a little bit. Scole does not mean sitting there idle or, flipping through your phone or, resting necessarily with nothingness, although good rest is good, but, it's active in its nature. So good. Well, so I'm intrigued with you are a person, I presume you have a business, obviously a very successful business person coming out of a classical school environment. I'm kind of the opposite, a business person going back into the classical school environment. But I'm really, I'm excited by your success. It appears to me that what I guess it was 24 years ago or so, you spotted an opportunity or a need perhaps in the marketplace for what it is that Classical Academy Press does. But how are things going? Kind of what are you working on? What are your major initiatives? How do those tie to national trends or things you're seeing in the marketplace?
Well, thanks for that question. Yeah, we, like so many people who go into business, it was an extension of a love, enjoying, loving classical education, learning to do it on the job. Because when I started in 1997, I did not really know what I was doing. It was a slow education to learn what it means to lead a classical school and be a classical educator. Lots of trial and error, learning from others, and just keeping going. But we saw a need because of that time in the late 90s, there was very little publishing, very little curricula had been published. And so myself and 3 other teachers, we thought, well, maybe when it comes to Latin and logic, we might have something that we could contribute. So we just dipped our toes in, and maybe it was at the right time, and those curricula started to grow, and we just kept growing with it. So by about 2007, I was working 2 full-time jobs. No, by 2005, my wife tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You've got to choose here." And so then I left. By 2007, I resigned from my head of school role. Very peaceful transition. My kids stayed on at the school and all graduated there. And then I went full-time with Classical Academic Press. As to kind of like what we've seen, we just kept working on curriculum. And one of the things that our company has thought is that classical curricula does not need to be dusty, stuffy, elitist, and, kind of boring. Because again, this education is ordered to the human. It's delightful. And so a classical curriculum should be delightful. It should be beautiful. So we try to wed as much as we can truth to beauty. We want the 4th grader, when she holds this book in her hand, say our Latin for Children curriculum, to love it. So we're designing it with her in mind, as well as the parents and the teachers. So it's full color. It's story based, but it's teaching, Latin truly and really. We try to do that with all of our curricula. And we've been more or less successful, and we continue to refine our curricula based on the response of people using it and our own growing maturity and facility doing, curriculum creation and publishing. We also started an online teacher training platform called classicalu.com. And that was because, going back 10 or more years ago, a lot of new startup schools did not have much to offer in terms of faculty training. And I was going around the country doing some faculty training and saw this firsthand. So we decided, why don't we record a few veterans that were among us who have been doing this for a while and acquired some degree of expertise, and offer training online, recorded training, which is second best, by the way. First best is always to be in person. But there were a lot of schools that didn't have first or second best as an option. So we've done that, and that's been growing a lot, and we're refining that. We're going to be offering live teacher demos, we're coaching, and we're redesigning that site. That'll be coming out in January. And then we also have an online academy called Scholarly Academy, mainly for homeschooling families in the K-12 space. Mainly it's grades 3 through 12. So what's next? Mathematics is next for us. It's the last major curricular line that we have not developed. So what does it look like to create a mathematics curriculum that's classical in its orientation and assumptions from the ground up? And that'll be a multi-year project. Building curriculum it just takes a long time. It's, we have small teams working on these projects, and it takes a lot of collaboration and conversation. It's a slow work.
Yeah. Do you find the homeschooling environment growing rapidly? Is that what are sort of the general trends in that universe?
The tide is rising for everyone. So parents generally are waking up and wanting a good human education for their children. And so the school choice, educational choice legislation around the country is changing the way parents think, or reflects the changing moods and minds of parents who want options. And so a number of families are homeschooling. And if you can afford it and you can do it, and it can be a really good thing. And so that's happening in increasing numbers. It's hard to get really good statistics to know just what's happening, but I think it's probably safe to say that for every student who's being trained at a classical school, there's one at a homeschool too. I think we're getting close to 1 million people who are being classically educated in either schools or homeschools. We know that there are some getting on to like 1,500 schools that have started, both in the private and charter sector. So the trend is that there's more coming, and the ESAs and the charter schools that allow for public funding of this kind of education definitely increasing in popularity. There are now, I think, almost 16 or 17 states that have some form of school choice legislation on the books.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Is that true in Georgia?
Yes, there has been. I think COVID in particular was an accelerator that may have been a bit temporary in nature, sort of. And this is anecdotal, but I think a lot of families with much clearer insight as to what was occurring in their children's classrooms decided they needed to be somewhere else. They opted to school them at home, but I think that as distance passes, time passes from that pandemic, it feels like perhaps the numbers may decline a little bit. I mean, our schools, we have 3 schools in Georgia. We've enrolled about 2,000 students, and we've got about 4,000 students on wait lists.
Mm.
And we do notice that a handful, probably, I'm gonna estimate this, maybe 10, 12%, that come into our schools are coming out of a homeschool environment.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, that's we welcome that. We're all in favor of school choice. However, moms and dads decide to do that.
Mhm.
It seems like there's families who are truly interested in homeschooling for all the great and best reasons to do that. There are others that are sort of doing it out of a sense of necessity, and to the degree they can find, more of a full-time, call it traditional school environment that they trust and believe in, they'll opt in that direction. That's kind of been our observation.
Yeah, I think that there's a large number of parents who, if there were a good classical school within reach and that they could afford, would choose it. I don't know
Mhm.
what the percentage is, but I think it's a very significant percentage. So there needs to be a lot more. I think the demand is growing beyond the supply, and there's still a lack of awareness. It's growing, but there are still a lot of American families that just wouldn't know to wouldn't know how to define or describe a classical education.
Yep.
So there's more work to be done in terms of just helping people to understand what it is, and then there's be more work to start more schools. So I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing there in Atlanta and already launching another school. There there are 50 million students in the country in K through 12,
Right.
and if we have 1 million being classically educated, we're just getting started.
That's right.
And I think this too. I don't know what you think about this, Matthew, but this is just a very loose theory, okay? But some people have talked about it. How many people fought in the Revolutionary War? How many Americans were willing to take up arms? Apparently, it was like around 3%. So some people think that if 5% of the population decide to do something earnestly, that becomes a kind of force multiplier or lever, and that it can have large scale cultural influence. So I think if we could get to, say, 10%, which would be 5 million, if 5 million people were being classically educated, I think it would change this country.
Yeah.
I think if we got to 5%, that would be 2.5 million. I think we'd see cultural change. We're already seeing some really significant things. It's anecdotal, but people who have been classically trained and are doing really creative, interesting things in our country. Starting businesses, working in government, going to military, going into the education sector. With people who've been liberally trained, they'll be able to serve well. And isn't that what we want? We want to
Yes.
see our this country flourish. So I think I see it this way. I see it as a large scale national endeavor that we need to bless our communities. This
Yes.
country needs it. Our families need it. Churches need it. Our our local towns and cities need it. The government needs it. Business needs it. Um, so it's a way of serving and blessing this country. That's what gets me up in the morning.
Well, I'm with you on that completely, and I truly I really enjoy the way you just framed that. I mean, I think that's a great I actually have a dinner Wednesday night with a group of donors, and, I've been sort of thinking about ways to share with them, and, I think your idea around whether it's 2.5%, 5%, whatever number. Um, I think you're right about that. I think that that is very encouraging and inspiring, and sometimes there are groups and people that may mobilize to take action, whether that's through giving or launching schools, learning to launch schools. Sometimes having a goal, having a big idea like that is what people need to accelerate action. And, so I'm gonna be thinking about that a little bit of ways to I mean, we're just one little teeny organization in one state in the nation, but we do have the benefit of, um, being part of a couple of different networks, and so we're in the space of where people are talking about, the renewal of classical education as a way forward, both at the individual level for communities and, of course, for the nation itself, and I that's how I view it. That's kind of my motivating idea is that this work is great at every level of analysis,
Yeah.
and, so, in any event, I appreciate you sharing that thought. I think that's inspiring and, one
I
I'll
think that we're seeing philanthropy starting to activate. Those who have been blessed with stewarding significant wealth always have the challenge and problem of, well, how do I invest?
That's right.
And if 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 this could be a meaningful investment that would actually change lives and bless the country, then I think we'll see more gifts coming. And then
Yeah.
with that comes responsibility because the, most of these, probably almost all of these donors are very intelligent, thoughtful, sophisticated business people. And they understand return on investment and they understand when a program has been properly prepared and planned for or not. So, that just means that organizations like yours and mine have to increase our own skill and being able to know how to grow responsibly,
Yes.
so that when resources become available, it's not wasted, that it's actually used to good effect.
Have
So I
you,
see that happening around the country.
have you been in dialogue with, say, networks of classical schools that have confronted this challenge of, perhaps having even drawn financial support for growth, but also and wanting to sort of lay down the foundation of what I would just consider to be really sound business practices that are necessary and even in this nonprofit space of classical schools, private or charter, but also kind of wanting to do that while delivering classical education with integrity. And, there seems to, I think it's kind of a false distinction actually, but it comes up a lot in circles I'm in around, how can you possibly apply really sound business practices to this growing enterprise and at the same time, you know, be really true to the classical approach. Do you ever hear that? Does that ever come up in your conversations?
It absolutely does. So I'll just cite one organization where I know this has been the case, and there are others. The Society for Classical Learning, um, under the leadership of Eric Cook. Eric has been a colleague for a while, a good friend, and he has over the last several years just been in enough conversations with high net worth donors who are interested to learn this side of to learn, if you will, the financial and stewardship realities of being able to steward and be accountable for significant investments. So he's just shared with me over the last few years, like what he's learned talking to donors who have done this, because in
Mhm.
many cases, it is thoughtful business leaders who are donors who have essentially trained him, helped him to understand how this works, so that the Society for Classical Learning could do the kind of planning that was needed in order to be able to, steward wealth. And so that's just affected the way this SCL has done its planning. They've called in people to help them, and they didn't do it in 6 weeks. They've been doing it over years, 2 or 3
Yeah.
years. So, but I think that's true of all the organizations that I'm talking to, more or less. SCL, ACCS. There's a new institute starting called the Humanitas Institute that I do some consulting for, and it's not going to be a foundation per se, but it's philanthropy backed, and it wants to help contribute to the rising tide of classical ed,
Mhm.
particularly by increasing the awareness of classical education, because 95% of Americans don't know what it is. So
That's
this
right.
institute wants to create media assets that are best in class, that will help that 95% of the country understand what it is, so that they
Right.
can make a thoughtful choice, an informed choice about considering it for, their own children. So,
Yeah.
and then there's a number of, just because I've been involved in this renewal for some time, I hear about this stuff, even if I don't know a lot about it. I certainly hear about it. So I think the answer is yes, it's happening, and I think the question is, can we do it well,
Right.
right? And so there are regional donors, and sometimes there are national level donors, but I guess you know this probably more than I do. There's an art and a business to doing this with excellence. So that
Yes.
you know
Well,
that
we're on the quest to figure that out. I mean, we've had some early success. Our organizations are, we first had the idea about 14 years ago, opened our first school 12 years ago. So we still feel quite youthful in the grand scheme. But this is something I'm thinking about all day, every day. Is just sort of, again, and the great news is, as you're suggesting, we do, as our schools demonstrate success, and that's measured in lots of different ways you can imagine. Um, Opportunities continue to come our way, and so it's very, very exciting. And the thing we know for certain,
mm,
and maybe I'm overstating that, but I don't think so. Feel like we can go into almost any community, and we don't really need a fancy marketing campaign. We just need to sit around a table with about 12 people in that community who are interested in education and tell the story of classical education. And our experience has been that seed of interest will explode into significant interest, and we'll launch a school with a long wait list, because families that, once they sort of get a taste of it, um, are pretty quick to give it a try, and and then ordinarily find that it's good. So it's, to me, that's something that's incredibly hopeful, and I certainly don't mean to be braggadocious. We're very much, experimenting and figuring out the best way to do things every day, with, I hope, a lot of humility, but also hopefully a lot of, speed to correct our errors.
yeah.
And, but it just feels like we've got a nation very hungry for something different. And moms and dads, even if they can't quite give you the most articulate description of what classical education is, they sense that it is, um, could be a great thing for their kids and their family and their communities. So
Hey,
anyway,
well, I'm hearing the same thing.
yeah,
It does raise another question, though, which is, how do we how do we secure the supply to meet this demand, and maintain quality
yes,
as we grow or scale, and particularly with teachers. So we
yes,
just need more better prepared classical educators. So I know that
yes,
everybody's talking about that, and so teacher training is important, recruitment's important, getting more college programs online to offer programs that train potential teachers well. You're affiliated with Hillsdale. Hillsdale College has got a graduate program now for training a classical educator. you know, but there's not enough of them.
That's right.
So, I think figuring out how to to grow, increase the supply of great and well-trained,
Yes.
uh, teachers is gonna be a key need in the next 10 years.
Well, and hopefully it's just a situation of exponential growth. We continue to graduate young Americans who have grown up in this kind of education. They like my own daughter is gone through our school, is now studying classical Latin and Greek and literature and music at Wake Forest. And I asked her maybe about 6 months ago, I said, Lucy, do you ever think you may want to pursue teaching or perhaps leadership in one of our schools? And she said, Dad, I'm studying Greek and Latin. What do you think I'm thinking about? Of course, that's what I want to do. So that's something a dad loves to hear. Um, but no, actually, and we could probably go on, and I would love to actually talk more about that and maybe find some ways to collaborate on that. But I totally agree. We put a lot of emphasis, and Hillsdale does too, as a partner of ours. We've pretty well put our finger on that very thing, that developing teachers, and I would also say school leaders, principals, head of schools. We've sort of actually recently started to identify that, yeah, we've got a lot of good resources for teachers, and we think we have an idea how to train them and develop them over time. And it is a time consuming endeavor no matter what. And then we've got some pretty good programs. And as you've mentioned, some graduate programs that are particularly helpful for head of school types. And we've also put infrastructure in place there. But what we've recently put our finger on is that transition from teacher to principal is another kind of ladder step on the ladder there that we need to do better of helping young teachers that are have aspirations for leadership. We need to be able to serve them and help them make that transition as well, which is another interesting challenge because while we're doing that, we never want to insinuate that you know remaining a master teacher is somehow less than anything, because it isn't. That's um, the soul of any school. I'm sure you would agree is in the faculty. And so anyway, it sounds like we're all kind of wrestling through these same dynamics of wanting to grow and wanting to do it well.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh, it makes me think about how it'll be useful to have some convenings of leaders, to compare notes and talk about these things. I
mhm.
know the Humanitas Institute wants to convene gatherings for this purpose. I could imagine, a convening of leaders of all the college programs,
Yes.
and to invite people who might want to create a program. Because I think regionally it'd be helpful if there was within driving distance a master's program, say, that were available to most of our classical schools. In Here in Pennsylvania, at Eastern University, there's the Templeton Honors College run by Dr. Brian Williams, and they have the Master of Arts in Teaching program at Templeton, and it does a great job of training teachers and potential leaders, such that around Philadelphia and even into the Harrisburg area, it's drivable. And so there's over the last 7 or 8 years, there have been graduates of that program just populating the schools around Philadelphia. So that should happen in Atlanta.
Mhm.
There should be a program that's just that's feeding and providing convenient, high quality training, and then every metro area in the country, in the years to come. So
Yes.
I'm right with you there. I think those are needs, and but things are happening. But again, with strategy, investment, the right programs, the right lessons learned, I think we could do this well and faster if we
Yes.
just communicate with
Yes.
one another.
Well, just to touch on it briefly, because we frequently refer to this as kind of our most essential limiting factor in Georgia, and actually I know this to be a national challenge, particularly in the charter school movement.
Mm,
But facilities identification, preparation, financing is a very significant issue as well.
mm,
I would, just may or may not find this interesting, but in Georgia, we feel like we've got a pretty strong political environment for the perpetuation of our mission. We know we've got very, very strong public demand for what we're doing. We feel like, um, even from a stream of interested teachers and leaders, um, we feel pretty good about the quantity and quality of applicants that we get. Not to say we can't focus on training and development programs as we were just describing, but really the limiting factor at the moment is for startup schools to be able to secure a facility um, that works well. Now, in fairness, we are creating schools that have 700 to 1,000 students K-12, so usually about 54 to 72 students per grade. So we're not planting micro schools. We're planting, full on K-12 academies that have many of the extracurricular activities and fine arts and sports and so forth that other schools would. And that's a strategic decision we've made. We certainly could orient the schools to be significantly smaller, although frankly, I'm not sure the funding works out quite as well. But in any event, so that's just kind of in addition to the human capital side of things, the facilities formula is a difficult one to work out as well. So anyway,
Yeah. Um, it's a multifaceted endeavor
that's right.
with so many different components,
Yeah,
both the business, the stewardship, the financial, the educational, parental, the communal, the familial, the ecclesial. It's all there,
yeah,
but that's what education is.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, and we love to learn, we love to solve these problems, and we feel, we're very devoted to this mission because we've experienced the beauty of this thing, both for our own children and our own families, but also to see a family that's really looking for options that does not find a fit either in private schools or in the public schools. It's really a joy of my life to be part of that solution for certain families that otherwise wouldn't have it. So feel very grateful. I know you do too, to be part of that. So
It's true. It's I don't know. It's such rewarding work.
it is.
Our team. Whenever we talk. We express our gratitude for being able to do something that's really meaningful.
Yeah,
So, any of your viewers or listeners uh, who are ready to do what you've done, should consider it
that's
because
right.
it's like if you're working successfully, at something that's probably still good work, but what if you could work doing something that you really loved and that was great work?
That's
Maybe
right.
you'll earn less money, but your soul will be fat.
That's
Um,
right. Well
you should
said. Well said.
you should come.
Well, Dr. Perrin, you've been an inspiration to me. I'm thrilled that we finally got to meet. Again, I picked up your original introduction to classical education so many years ago, and have read it. It meant a lot to me in the early days of me getting my arms around this beautiful approach to the formation of moral and intellectual character. And so I just want to thank you for your contribution nationally. I'm sure you've done great things for your own team and your faculty and the leaders of your school and so forth there in Pennsylvania. But you've made this possible for thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands across the country. And anyway, I just hope that you take pride in that and the good kind of pride and feel good about your work because you really should. So
Well, you're kind, Matthew. Um, it's always a pleasure to meet a kindred spirit
yes,
who's
sir.
making the same sacrifices for the same reasons and for the same loves. So glad to get to know you and hear more about Liberty Classical Schools. And I'm excited to hear about another one starting. And I bet there'll be one after that.
Well, we certainly hope so. We certainly hope so. Well, um, all right. I was going to do a little bit. I won't call it a lightning round because that would just imply like a one word answer. We'll call it a short answer round, and then we'll wrap things up if that's okay. Um, so short answer here. Did you have a teacher in your own life that had a significantly positive impact on you?
Yes, John Frame, theology professor at Westminster Seminary in California.
Awesome. Awesome. The best thing about, I don't know if you'd consider yourself a Navy brat. Maybe that's too negative of a term, but what's the best thing about that experience for you?
Traveling and learning about other cultures, widening my horizons, and acquiring a curiosity about language.
Great. What was the worst thing about it?
My dad leaving uh, Guam before we had sold our house and being
Mm,
without my dad for a year
I can
because
imagine.
he had to report for duty at Paris Island.
Ooh, boy, that's a pretty big transition.
Hmm.
Okay, yeah, that's a tough one. Do you have hobbies outside of intellectual pursuits?
Yes, music, although you could say it's one of the liberal arts, but I'm not great at it, but I love the guitar. I play the guitar.
Great. Another thing we have in common, that's good. Um, of the classical figures, is there one that's particularly inspiring to you?
There's several. I enjoy Aristotle, uh,
Mhm.
Plato, Augustine, um, and I enjoy very much John Henry Newman and G.K. Chesterton. If you want to put him adjacent to the classical tradition,
Mhm. Mhm. Excellent. And maybe you've just answered this question, but, a book or books that have been most impactful to you and shaped your view of the world?
G.K. Chesterton's book Orthodoxy.
Mm. Yes.
He'd written a book called Heretics, where he criticizes a number of British figures, and someone said, "Well, that's nice, Chesterton. You're criticizing everybody. Why don't you tell us what you believe so that you can make yourself subject to criticism?" And so he said, "Okay, I'll write you that book, and I'll call it Orthodoxy." And it was basically what he called a slovenly autobiography. Um,
There's it's a very dense, short read. I
it's like
love
drinking honey, drinking a bottle of maple syrup. You need to do it slow.
Okay, in an age of distraction, digital distraction, how are you doing with that? And have you developed practices to maintain, or protect your attention?
Daily walk with this dog we have. He's a Vizsla, and he needs to be exercised every day. So my wife and I, or one of us, are out for about 45 minutes to an hour, starting every day with a walk.
Excellent.
That's been really helpful.
Great practice. Um, if you can, advice to parents, what should parents look for when considering a school for their children?
Teachers that you would love to see your children become like.
Mm, great.
Because there's a place where Christ says in Luke 6 that when a student's been fully trained, he will be like his teacher. That is probably a good rule of thumb. Your children are going to be like their teachers. So find teachers that you would like to be models for what your students will become, your children will become.
Very, very powerful. Okay, to aspiring teachers, what should an aspiring teacher study in college or graduate school?
Um, the liberal arts broadly, acquire facility with grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Um, learn a language. Um, read liberally in the great books of history, literature, and do some natural science as well. Um, so I think an interdisciplinary liberal arts curriculum is the best preparation. Learn how to learn so that if another discipline becomes necessary for you to learn in the future, you'd be able to acquire that almost on your own.
Excellent. That's great. Okay, finally, and we kind of touched on this earlier perhaps, but if looking ahead, if you kind of consider the state of the nation and the state of the classical education movement, for what are you most hopeful?
I'm most hopeful in the fortitude and determination I see in young mothers, aged 30 to 45. These are the women who are changing the face of the country because they're the ones who are taking education back. They've decided, great numbers of them, that education is a responsibility of the family. And they're taking that seriously, and they're no longer checking their kids into anybody's school to take care of all of education. They're expecting and wanting and willing to work for great schools and home schools, and they're the ones that are doing the most of the work.
Wow. The specificity of your answer there is moving. That's really great. That's awesome. Okay, Dr. Perrin, this has been awesome. I really, really appreciate your time. Tell our audience how they can find you, read more about you, buy your stuff.
Oh, you're kind. Our curricula is available at classicalacademicpress.com if you want to see some of the curricula we produced. We also have monographs on education, like The Good Teacher, and you mentioned Introduction to Classical Ed. We have about 15 or 20 books on classical education. But all major curricula, except for mathematics, you can find there. Then if you're interested in teacher training, I encourage you to take a look at classicalu.com, where we have over 100 courses of great teacher trainers providing teaching in that medium. And then if you're interested in online education, if you're schooling at home, we have classical courses for homeschooling families on scholaacademy.com. You could check that out.
That's great. Dr. Christopher Perrin, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're so very welcome. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you.
Awesome.